I finally watched The Smashing Machine, and I'm still trying to figure out what the movie was about. First and foremost, I went into this movie blind. I don't really know anything about Mark Kerr. I never heard of him. I'm not really a big MMA fan or anything like that. I'm familiar with the sport in general as far as like Dana White and some of the top dudes or whatever just from seeing stuff, but I don't follow the sport. So here's the things that I liked. I like the Rock's acting in this. I'm a Rock fan. I just, I think he's seems like a cool dude or whatever. I don't know how he is in real life, but that's I like him even when he does like all of the popcorn money grab movies and stuff like that, just, in general. So to see him in a movie like this where he's really steps into putting himself out there and giving his whole self to the character, I thought was really really good and interesting to see. I really liked the way the intro of the movie started off. It started off raw. It felt like that whole late 90s feel where we're just sort of like stepping into the new millennium and, from before HD was a thing and all of that. So it had like a nice raw feel for it. I also liked the way they introduced the character. The cinematography was dope, lighting, the camera movement, all of that. It just felt natural. And I liked the way the director actually shot a lot of it on VHS and in some places 16 millimeter. So I really thought that gave it the care and the authenticity that it needed to really make everything feel like the late 90s. And as far as Emily Blunt's character, I like Emily. I like Emily Blunt in general. I like her acting. So even though I hated the character in this movie, her character that she was playing, I thought she did a good job at just making that character feel just sort of in the way for the most part. All of the technical stuff was executed right. I thought the acting across all actors were good, but the story was just like a big nothing burger. It felt a way 10 times longer than it needed to be. It felt like a 3 hour biopic. I kept looking at my watch at a certain point, but it really felt like for the story that they told, it could have been told in like 90 minutes. The other thing was with the relationship. While it showed that Emily Blunt's character was, sort of one of the obstacles that Mark Kerr had to overcome, I didn't know if their relationship was going to end up being like a Johnny Depp, Amber Heard type of toxicity, or Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston, or Chris Brown and Rihanna, whatever. I just thought it was going to be more than just nagging and, him being super anal all the time and her just sort of being always inconsiderate. There's a certain point where he's just begging her to just like, yo, just chill out. Like, I got a big fight in 2 days. Just give me 2 days without the BS or whatever. And she just couldn't do it, and I don't know, that was some of the things that made me just sort of like, hate the character. Emily Blunt did a good job at just executing that. So I don't have a problem with that, but it never really went anywhere to me. So sometimes they would just get in an argument and you would think she's sort of out of the picture, but then she just pops up 2 scenes later like, hey, babe, I'm here. I just flew to Japan to see you. And it's sort of like, I don't know. I don't know if things were cut out of the story or if it was just the way they wrote the script and that was just how their relationship felt. I don't know. It just felt off. Everything that built up to his main fight where he was trying to win this $200,000 prize, when he had this big blowout fight with not Amber Heard, damn, with Emily Blunt's character, his girlfriend, she was really going over the edge. And I was thinking in the back of my head, like, oh, damn. So this is, something actually, I didn't look up Mark Kerr, the relationship, to see if he was still living or dead or, whatever. But in my mind, for some reason, I thought she was going to do something to push him over the top, or she was going to do something to herself to just, cloud his memory and, or not his memory, but cloud his judgment. He's going to go into that fight and just, I don't know, get paralyzed or something dramatic was gonna happen because of that fight. She put a gun to her head and I was thinking, oh damn, so she about to blow her head off or whatever. And this is gonna like, this is what the story is about. Like this is the dark, deep thing that this guy's been dealing with. And I know like, he had an opioid addiction, but they didn't really touch on that. They kind of just skipped over that, almost like they didn't want to like go too deep into it for some reason. Which is fair, but it didn't really give me a chance to see really the demons that he was, dealing with. So back to like when his girlfriend puts the gun to her head, he grabs her, takes the gun, and then, calls the police and sends her off or whatever. I guess I don't know if she got arrested or if they were doing some type of, the cop said something about doing a mental evaluation or something like that. Anyway, he goes off to the main fight the next day or the next week. I don't really have a sense of the timeline here. And then he loses the fight. This is, I guess when I was watching the fight it wasn't really as brutal as what I thought. I went into this, thinking that, it would be sort of like The Wrestler or some of the movies that might have heard or read about that this movie, kind of seemed on the surface like it would be like. With a title like The Smashing Machine, I'm thinking this is going to be like a brutal, gruesome, thing, especially being it is MMA, which is like one of the bloodiest sports out there. But anyway, so he loses the fight. And then, this was like the most disappointing part to me was that there's a sequence where he's in the shower after the fight and his best friend wins the fight. And they're sort of intercutting between him being in the shower and his best friend winning the fight. Mark, I forget this best friend's name. I know his last name was Coleman. But he's like smiling, and I guess that's a way they focused on him smiling. I don't know if he was having some type of peace or something like that, but it was almost like he was relieved and letting go or something like that, and was happy for his friend that his friend was winning. I don't really know what the takeaway there was, but to watch a 2-hour movie and really get into this character about how much this meant to him, only for him to be at the end just sort of smiling and happy that, oh, well, at least my homeboy won, F it or whatever. It really just felt like a waste of time or whatever. Like he got over it. So then they cut to a scene at the end where the real Mark Kerr is in the grocery store. He's being very extremely polite, which is what his character was, really portrayed throughout the whole movie, which I thought was interesting. But he's buying something out of the grocery store. He puts the groceries in his car. And there's captions that talk about like how him and his girlfriend ended up getting married 10 days after the blowout that they had or something like that. But it just really felt like they were trying to just give this guy his flowers, which is, really, that's fair. But it didn't really seem like it needed a movie. Like it could have been a 30-minute documentary or, something like that. It didn't really seem like, for what the story gave us, it didn't seem like it deserved The Rock and, the way it was sort of, I don't know. It just didn't seem like it needed to be a movie. That's the way I felt when I finished watching it. It really was, it was a solid movie and all that stuff, but I definitely will forget about it within the week, to be honest. I was just really underwhelmed with the story. Again, I wasn't looking for it to be The Wrestler or Iron Fist or anything like that. But I did want some type of grittiness and rawness and more depth to the story that those, movies had. And I didn't really get it here. It was really, if I had to sum it up and I explained it to somebody, like somebody that asked me, what was it about? I just say it's about a guy that's really passionate about fighting. He's really polite. He had a toxic girlfriend. He struggles from, a period of time to work his way up to this big championship where he gets $200,000. He loses, but he really kind of gets over it, like before he even leaves the gym, because his homeboy won the money. So it was sort of all good. And that was like the vibe that it was sort of like, all right, we watch this guy struggle from A to Z. And then when he doesn't get what he wants, he gets over it pretty quick. And I don't know if he was smiling at the camera because he was happy and letting go, or if he was losing his mind, or I don't really know. But anyway, it left me confused and underwhelmed. Let me know what you thought if you had a different opinion. Peace.